Will's home in northern England? Well, that answered that question at least. And she had commented earlier that she'd hoped her father would forget his efforts to wed her off now he and her brother were home. That meant she was Will's sister, Averil. Will had spoken often of the lass over the last 3 years, and the tales had never failed to make Cade smile and wonder about the girl. He was wondering even more now. Will had never said anything in all those tales that might explain why men would reject marriage to her. And what was this nonsense about being the devil's spawn? From all he knew, Will's father, Lord Mortain, was respected and well liked. Cade was suddenly curious to see what she looked like, and why she was suffering these rejections she spoke of. However, it seemed he wasn't meant to find out just yet, for when he opened his eyes again, it was to find that his vision had not improved. All Cade could see was a fuzzy figure seated beside the bed, bent over something in her lap. She appeared to be small in stature, her clothing dark, and her hair a bright, fiery orange in the light from the fire. Frustration welling up in him, he blinked several times, but it did little good, and he closed his eyes again with resignation. "I know," she exclaimed suddenly. "I shall tell you tales of my naughty childhood." He could hear the wry amusement in her voice and almost opened his eyes to try again to see her expression, but it seemed like too much effort, so he didn't bother and merely lay wondering which tale she would tell. Cade was very sure Will had told him every story there was to tell while they had been held prisoner the last 3 years. Their days had been spent laboring under the baking sun for their captors, but in the evenings they sat in dark, windowless cells, passing the time by talking of home and family. Cade had told Will most of, if not all, the details of his own youth and clan, and was quite sure Will had done the same. So he was surprised when Averil began to tell an unfamiliar tale. "I did not have such a naughty childhood, really. I was mostly well behaved," she assured him as if confessing a sin. "But when I was 6, I did try to run away, though 'twas not very successful." That announcement was followed by a small, almost embarrassed chuckle. "You see, Will was 5 years older than I. He was my only playmate, and was good enough not to mind having me trailing about after him. We used to play hide-and-go-seek and other childish games together after our lessons were over for the day. But then, when I was 5, Will was sent away to train, and I lost my only playmate and best friend." A little sigh of sadness slid from her lips at the memory. "I was most unhappy, and somewhat spoiled by having had him be so indulgent of me. I begged Mother and Father to bring him back so that I could play with him again, but they were often busy and had little time to soothe a small girl missing her brother. So I decided that if they would not bring him back to me, I should do as I'd always done and follow him. First I asked my father's captain of the guard to please take me to see Will. He, of course, refused, explaining most kindly that my father would not approve. I fear I kicked him in the shins for his refusal. I then ran to my room to have a good cry, and before the tears had dried on my face, decided I would have to run away. I planned it all most carefully in my child's mind. I snuck into the kitchens and flinched some plums and buns, while cook wasn't looking, then gathered my favourite bed linen, for I knew it might be a long way, and I might have to sleep outdoors a night or two, and then I headed out. There are secret corridors built into the walls of Mortain." She paused, and there was a frown in her voice, as she admitted, "I suppose I should not have told you that. Fortunately, you were not conscious to hear. Still." Cade strained to listen as she paused again. He was glad when she continued, "Well, you are not likely to recall when you awake anyway, so the secret passages run between the rooms, then join up at a tunnel that ends outside the Bailey walls. Will and I were always told that it was the way for us to flee should the castle ever be attacked, and that is how I got out of the castle. I took the candle from my room, lit it from the fire in my nursemaid."